Once upon a time, on a quiet street lined with crooked rooftops and dimly lit windows, Sophie sat in her small attic room. The wind howled outside, slapping rain against the panes with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic persistence. The evening was thick with storm clouds, the kind that seemed to swallow up every trace of light. A strange hush hung in the air, as if even the trees were holding their breath. Sophie, bundled in her woolen sweater, leaned against the cool window, staring into the dark night. It was on nights like these, when the wind whispered secrets through the cracks, that Sophie's imagination ran wild. But tonight something was different. A soft tapping, quick and rhythmic, sounded against the glass. At first, Sophie thought it was just the storm playing tricks, but the tapping grew more insistent. Heart racing, she slid open the window, and that's when it happened. A flash of green, a streak of brilliance against the night sky, slammed into her room, sending a burst of rainwater across the floor. She stumbled back in surprise, her eyes wide, as a dazzling emerald parrot perched on her windowsill, feathers gleaming in the dim light. With an exaggerated flap of his wings, he tilted his head, studying Sophie with a cheeky glint in his eyes. "Well, this is certainly not my idea of a landing spot," he squawked, flapping his wings to shake off the wetness. Sophie blinked, stunned, her heart racing, not only because a parrot had just crashed into her room, but because she could have sworn the bird had just spoken. The parrot puffed out his chest, shaking off the last droplets of water, and glared at Sophie with a mix of irritation and amusement. "What? You've never had a dramatic entrance before?" he quipped, his voice sharp with theatrical flair. Sophie, still frozen in place, could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Are you talking?" she asked hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. The parrot tilted his head, as if considering the question. "Of course I'm talking. What else would I do? Tweet at you like a simpleton?" He ruffled his feathers proudly, then paused. "Though, given the circumstances, I'm more than happy to have a conversation. I've been looking for someone like you." Sophie blinked. "Someone like me," she repeated, her voice trembling slightly. The storm outside roared, the wind bending the trees in strange shapes. "But I've never heard a bird talk before." The parrot gave her a skeptical look. "Oh, you have. You just never listened," he said with a knowing smirk. "It's a gift, you see. Only a few people can understand us. And you, my dear, are one of them." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She had always known she could understand animals, since she was very little. It had been her secret, one she had never shared with anyone, for fear they wouldn't believe her. The parrot's words, however, confirmed something she had long suspected but never dared to admit out loud. I can understand you," she stammered. "Yes, indeed." The parrot puffed up, clearly pleased with himself. "Now, if you'll excuse my dramatic entrance, we've got more pressing matters. I'm being hunted, you see, by a rather unpleasant magician who wants to silence all of us talkers. And you, Sophie, are my only hope." Sophie's head spun. A talking bird. A magician. It all felt so unreal, yet somehow it was exactly the kind of adventure she had always wished for. But deep down, she couldn't shake the unease. What had she just gotten herself into? Sophie took a slow, uncertain breath, her mind racing as the parrot fluttered his wings impatiently. The storm outside raged on, as if the world itself was conspiring to push her into this strange, impossible adventure. She glanced at the parrot, his emerald feathers bright against the dimness of her room. He seemed to exude confidence, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of desperation that made Sophie pause. The parrot shook his head, clearly seeing her hesitation. "Look, I know this sounds mad," he said with an exaggerated sigh, "but I promise you, I'm not some figment of your imagination. I'm real, and I need you to help me." Sophie bit her lip, wondering if it was even possible to believe this bizarre creature. Could she really communicate with him? Could she really be part of something so wild, so dangerous? Her secret, the one she had kept buried deep inside for so long, was now coming to the surface. The parrot hopped closer, his beak clicking with urgency. "I know what you're thinking. I can't possibly believe this, right? But listen to me, Sophie. You have to believe. There's a whole world of creatures out there, and some of us, like me, can speak. There's a reason for that. A purpose." Sophie swallowed hard. She had always known she was different, that her ability to understand animals was not something everyone could do. But she never imagined it would lead to something like this. "What do you need me to do?" she asked quietly. The parrot's eyes gleamed with excitement. "First, we need to get away from here. The magician won't be far behind. And trust me, Sophie, you won't want to meet him face to face. He's not the kind to show mercy." Sophie nodded, her heart pounding. It felt as though the weight of the world had shifted, and she was no longer just a quiet girl with a secret. Now she had a role to play in something much larger and far more dangerous than she ever imagined. The parrot's wings flapped again, this time with a purposeful motion. "We've no time to waste," he declared, his voice suddenly serious. "The magician will track me here soon enough. And when he does, there will be no hiding. You'll have to trust me, Sophie. We're going on the run." Sophie felt a rush of nervous energy, but there was also something else, a strange sense of adventure rising within her. It was ridiculous, she knew that. A parrot, a magician, secret animal choirs. But hadn't she always wished for something extraordinary to happen? Hadn't she longed for the kind of adventure people only dreamed of? The parrot perched on the edge of the windowsill, scanning the stormy skies. "Follow me and stay quiet. The rooftops are our best bet. It's the only way to outrun him." With a deep breath, Sophie stood and moved towards the window. As she stepped out into the stormy night, the chill wind whipped around her, but she barely noticed. The parrot hopped onto her shoulder, his claws gently digging into her sweater. "Keep your eyes sharp," he said. "It's a dangerous city at night, especially when you're not alone." They crept along the edges of the roof, moving carefully between the chimneys and spires of the neighboring buildings. Sophie tried to ignore the dizziness that came from the height, focusing instead on the parrot's every word. "Above all else," he continued, "never trust the cats." Sophie frowned, looking up just in time to see a pair of glowing eyes flash from a dark rooftop. A sleek, shadowy form, cat-like, but something about it seemed off, watched them from the distance. It was a creature of the night, something unnatural. "Cats," Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes," the parrot replied, his tone grim. "Magical cats. Part of the magician's forces. And they're clever, much more clever than they seem." Sophie shivered. The night was growing colder, the storm fiercer, and yet she felt a sense of urgency that drove her forward. They had no choice but to keep moving. The wind howled louder as Sophie and the parrot darted from rooftop to rooftop, the city sprawling endlessly beneath them. Every step felt precarious, like they were walking on the edge of a dream. Sophie's heart raced with both excitement and fear, the thrill of their escape mingling with the ominous weight of what lay ahead. The parrot on her shoulder was surprisingly light, but his sharp eyes were constantly scanning the horizon, always alert. "I told you about the cats," the parrot said, his voice suddenly low, filled with a quiet urgency. "You'll understand soon enough. Stay close, and don't look back unless you absolutely have to." Sophie nodded, trying to suppress the unsettling feeling crawling up her spine. The rooftop stretched out before them like a maze of stone and wood, and Sophie's mind raced as she tried to make sense of it all. How had she gotten here? A quiet girl, never quite fitting in, now running from a magician across a dark, stormy city with a talking bird on her shoulder. It felt like something out of a fairy tale, but the danger in the parrot's voice made it clear that this wasn't a simple story. There was real peril, real magic, and Sophie was in the thick of it. Ahead, a narrow gap between two buildings opened up. A daunting jump. Sophie hesitated, peering down at the dark alley below. It felt as if the very air was thickening, pressing down on her. But the parrot didn't pause. "Trust me," he called back, his feathers ruffling with determination. "You've got this." Sophie took a deep breath and followed his lead, pushing her fear aside as she leapt across the gap, her fingers brushing the cold stone of the opposite roof. The ground felt farther away than it should, but she had made it. She exhaled, surprised at herself. The parrot fluttered in a quick circle, then perched on her shoulder once more. "See? Not so hard." But Sophie didn't have time to enjoy the victory. From the corner of her eye, she saw it, the glow of golden eyes, slinking across the rooftops below. Cat. And not just any cat. This one moved with an eerie, unnatural grace, its eyes tracking them with a predator's precision. "Keep moving," the parrot urged, his voice tight. "They've spotted us." Sophie's pulse quickened as she heard the faint, rhythmic tapping of paws against the stone rooftops. The cat had seen them. She could feel it, like the air was thick with tension, every sound amplified by the stillness of the night. The parrot on her shoulder shuffled nervously, his feathers bristling. "Don't look back, Sophie. Don't even flinch," he whispered urgently. The cats can sense fear. The more you hesitate, the more they'll close in. Sophie's legs felt stiff, like they didn't belong to her anymore, but she kept moving, putting one foot in front of the other. Her breath came in short gasps as they leapt across more rooftops, higher now, where the chimneys and weathered spires jutted like jagged teeth. She could hear the soft swish of fur against the slate tiles behind her, just out of sight but unmistakably close. The cat was on their tail. "Why are they chasing us?" Sophie asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the rising panic. "They're no ordinary cats," the parrot replied, glancing over his shoulder. "They're part of the magician's enchanted army. Creatures that can track you wherever you go, no matter how far you run. And they've got magic on their side." Sophie's heart sank. How could they possibly escape something like that? It felt like no matter how fast she moved, the cats were always one step behind. As if on cue, a flash of silver fur darted into view, its eyes gleaming with that eerie, unnatural light. Sophie's foot slipped on the wet tiles, and she stumbled, barely catching herself before she fell. The parrot squawked in alarm, flapping his wings wildly as he steadied her with a talon. "Careful," he hissed. "We've got to stay ahead of them. No more slipping up." Sophie nodded, her grip tightening on the rough stone edge of the roof. The fear that had gripped her now burned with a new determination. She wasn't going to let this magical cat, whatever it was, catch them. Not when she had already come this far. They darted to the next rooftop, their pace frantic now, and Sophie's mind raced. What if the cat wasn't the only danger out here? What if the magician himself was tracking them, waiting for the right moment to strike? The next rooftop was even steeper, its surface slick with rainwater that shimmered in the pale moonlight. Sophie's legs ached from the sprint, but there was no time to stop, no time to rest. The cat was closer now, its glowing eyes flashing with malevolent intent. Sophie could hear the swish of its tail behind them, a sound that made her heart race faster with each passing second. "We're almost there," the parrot muttered, his voice strained. "We just need to reach the pigeon loft. If we can get inside, the door will seal behind us, and the cats can't follow." Sophie didn't ask how he knew all this. At this point, she was simply grateful that he had a plan. She pushed herself harder, ignoring the burning in her lungs as they neared a narrow archway that led to the next building. Through the arch, a large, rusted iron gate loomed ahead, half hidden by the shadows of the surrounding rooftops. The pigeon loft. Sophie had never seen it before, but the parrot seemed to know the layout of the city better than anyone. She could see the old wooden structure in the distance now, perched high atop a neighboring tower. Its weathered walls seemed to blend into the stormy night, a perfect hiding place in a world that seemed to be unraveling around her. "Hold on," the parrot urged, taking flight ahead. "We're almost there." Sophie's legs burned as she took the last leap, her fingers just grazing the ledge of the pigeon loft before she pulled herself over the side. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but there was no time to pause and catch her breath. The parrot was already hovering near the loft's entrance, his feathers glinting in the moonlight as he motioned for her to follow. Sophie dashed toward him, hearing the unmistakable sound of the cat's paw steps growing louder behind them. She reached the loft's door, her hand trembling as she grasped the cold iron handle. She turned it. Nothing happened. "Pull harder," the parrot shouted. With a final, desperate tug, the door creaked open, just as a shadow leapt across the gap between the rooftops. Sophie barely had time to slip inside before the massive clawed paws of the cat scraped against the door's surface, inches from her fingers. "Close it," the parrot urged, his voice panicked. Sophie slammed the door shut, and the sound of the cat's growl was muffled behind them. She collapsed against the wooden walls of the loft, trying to catch her breath, but despite the danger that still loomed over them, there was a strange sense of relief. For now they were safe. Inside the pigeon loft, the air was thick with the smell of old wood and the faint scent of feathers. Sophie took a moment to steady herself, her heart still racing from the chase. The parrot fluttered down to a dusty perch, his wings rustling as he settled. Sophie leaned against the wall, trying to calm the chaotic thoughts in her head. "We're safe for now," the parrot said, though his voice still held a trace of urgency. "But not for long. The magician is relentless, and once he realizes we've escaped into the lofts, he'll use his magic to track us down. We don't have much time." Sophie wiped the rain from her face, her mind struggling to catch up with everything that had happened. She had always kept her secret about understanding animals, but now she was involved in something so much bigger than herself. It felt like the world had tilted sideways, and everything she knew was suddenly turned on its head. "Why me?" she whispered, more to herself than to the parrot. "Why did the magician choose you? Why do I have to help?" The parrot cocked his head, his dark eyes softening for a moment. "Because you're a secret keeper, Sophie," he said simply. "You have a gift, a rare one. Only someone who can hear and understand the creatures of this world can help us. You are the bridge between us and the sanctuary. Without you, the magic will fade, and the birds, our voices, will be lost forever." Sophie shivered at the weight of his words. The parrot's tone had shifted, becoming almost reverent. She wasn't sure she believed all of it, but something inside her told her he wasn't lying. There was a deeper connection between them, something she couldn't explain. "You said there's a sanctuary," Sophie continued, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Where is it? How do we get there?" The parrot puffed his chest, clearly proud of the information he was about to reveal. "It's hidden," he said with a mischievous glint in his eye. "In the heart of the city, beneath the old bell tower. But to get there, we must first pass through the riddle of the pigeon loft." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "A riddle?" The parrot nodded solemnly. "The loft is a puzzle. Not just any puzzle, one designed to test the worth of a secret keeper." Sophie's mind raced. Test? What kind of test? She wasn't sure she was ready for any more challenges tonight, but she knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. The air inside the pigeon loft grew quieter, the sounds of the storm muffled by the thick wooden walls and the nest-like clutter around them. Sophie's mind was still spinning, but the parrot's words cut through her confusion, focusing her thoughts. Riddle, test, sanctuary. Sophie looked around the loft, her eyes scanning the dusty rafters and the nests that lined the walls. Pigeons cooed softly in the corners, oblivious to the storm that still raged outside. The parrot's voice broke through the silence again, bringing Sophie's attention back to him. "The riddle, Sophie. It's not just a game. It's a key to the sanctuary. And you must solve it to prove you're worthy of being the secret keeper." Sophie frowned, trying to make sense of it. The idea of solving a riddle didn't seem too difficult at first glance, but the parrot's serious tone told her that this wasn't something she could take lightly. "What kind of riddle?" she asked, her voice hesitant. The parrot fluttered to the ground, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "You'll see in a moment. But first, understand this. The sanctuary is not just a place. It's a haven for all the creatures who have been silenced, for those who have been forgotten. And the only way to reach it is through the wisdom of the keeper. You can hear us, Sophie. But can you listen to us when it counts?" Sophie felt a pang of uncertainty at his words. She had always known her gift was special, but she had never considered it to be something so significant. Was she truly meant for this? Was she truly ready to help the animals in the way the parrot seemed to think? Before she could voice her doubts, a soft click echoed through the loft, followed by a gentle hum of energy that seemed to pulse from the walls. Sophie gasped as the wooden door to the loft creaked open, revealing a dim, spiraling staircase leading down into the shadows. "The test begins," the parrot said, his voice low and serious. "Follow me and remember, the riddle will not come to you all at once. It will be pieced together in the smallest of clues. Stay focused, Sophie." Sophie took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she stepped forward. The storm outside had grown quieter, but inside the loft, the silence felt heavier than ever. She had no idea what lay ahead, but she knew that whatever it was, it would change everything. Sophie descended the narrow, creaky staircase, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space below. The parrot fluttered ahead, his wings cutting through the silence as they ventured deeper into the unknown. The air grew colder the further they went, the storm's fury now a distant murmur, replaced by the faint hum of hidden magic that seemed to swirl around the stone walls. The staircase seemed endless, spiraling down like a tunnel toward something both ancient and mysterious. Finally, they reached the bottom, and Sophie's breath caught in her throat. The room before them was vast, far larger than any part of the loft above. It looked like an underground cavern, its walls lined with shelves of old books, crystals, and strange artifacts that pulsed with a faint, otherworldly glow. In the center of the room was a large stone pedestal, ancient symbols carved into its surface. Sophie could feel the weight of history in the air, the sense that this place had been untouched for centuries. "The riddle will begin here." The parrot's voice broke the silence, soft but firm. "Look around, Sophie. The answer is in the details." Sophie's eyes scanned the room, searching for any clue that might give her an insight into the riddle. The parrot fluttered down onto a ledge, watching her with an intensity that made her feel the gravity of the situation. She could feel the puzzle pressing against her, urging her to solve it. She approached the pedestal cautiously, her eyes tracing the symbols carved into the stone. The symbols were strange and unfamiliar, but they seemed to shimmer in the dim light, as if they were alive. As her fingers brushed against the surface of the pedestal, a low hum vibrated through her fingertips, and the symbols began to shift and change, revealing new patterns beneath the old. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber, soft and distant, but unmistakably clear. "What is silent, yet speaks to all who listen? What is unseen, yet felt by those who understand?" Sophie froze. The riddle had begun. The parrot perched on a nearby ledge, watching her intently. "Think, Sophie. You must answer this riddle, or we cannot proceed." "What is the answer?" Sophie's mind raced. "Silent yet speaks to all, unseen yet felt. What could it be?" Sophie's fingers tingled where they had brushed against the pedestal, the words of the riddle echoing in her mind. What was silent yet spoke to all? What was unseen yet felt by those who understand? Her heart pounded in her chest, and the weight of the question seemed to hang in the air, pressing down on her. She paced slowly around the pedestal, the room growing colder with each step. The parrot watched her intently, his beak clicking softly as if urging her to think faster. For a moment, Sophie felt as if she were back in her room, staring out the window on quiet nights when she could hear the wind, whispering, yet loud enough for her to understand. The wind, she thought, the air itself. Could that be the answer? It spoke to her without words, and yet she could feel its presence, the chill or warmth on her skin, the way it stirred the leaves in the trees. But could she be sure? She turned back to the pedestal, her gaze lingering on the shifting symbols. They seemed to swirl, almost as if they were reacting to her thoughts, guiding her toward the answer. The answer lies within the unseen, the parrot spoke softly, his voice urging her to focus. Listen, Sophie. Listen closely. Sophie closed her eyes, trying to block out the noise of the world around her, focusing instead on the feeling, the sense of something beyond her vision, something powerful and intangible. It was then that the answer clicked, like a door unlocking in her mind. The wind, she whispered, her voice trembling with certainty. It's the wind. It's silent, but it speaks to those who listen. There was a long, breathless moment of silence, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Then, slowly, the symbols on the pedestal shifted once more, rearranging themselves in a complex pattern. The stone rumbled softly, and the pedestal began to rise, revealing a hidden passage beneath it. Well done, the parrot said, his voice filled with quiet pride. You've passed the first test, Sophie. But the journey ahead will be far more difficult. Be prepared. Sophie took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle around her. She had solved the riddle, but what lay beyond this hidden passage? She couldn't be sure, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. As the stone pedestal slowly sunk into the ground, revealing the hidden passage beneath, Sophie's breath caught in her throat. The air that escaped from the dark tunnel was cool and damp, carrying with it the scent of earth and something ancient. Her heart pounded in her chest, both from the thrill of solving the riddle and the nervous anticipation of what lay ahead. The parrot hopped from his perch, his eyes glinting with a mix of approval and caution. Are you ready? He asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. This next part is far trickier than you think. The path won't be easy, and there will be moments when you'll want to give up. But you must press on. The sanctuary is within your reach. Sophie nodded, though doubt still lingered in the corners of her mind. What if she wasn't truly meant for this? What if the magician's magic was too powerful for them to defeat? But when she looked at the parrot, she saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. That hope was all she needed to quiet the doubts in her heart. Without another word, she stepped forward into the passage. The walls were damp and rough beneath her fingertips as she made her way deeper into the hidden tunnel. The parrot fluttered ahead, his wings barely making a sound in the thick, oppressive silence. The passage narrowed as they moved deeper into the earth, the stone walls growing colder and the air heavier with each step. Sophie's thoughts wandered back to the parrot's words. The sanctuary is within your reach. But what exactly was this sanctuary? Was it a place of peace and safety, or was it something else entirely? The further they went, the more the path seemed to shift and twist. Sophie felt as though she were walking through a living maze, each turn leading her to another unknown. At one point, the walls seemed to close in on them, the tunnel barely wide enough for Sophie to squeeze through. Her breath quickened, her mind racing, but she pressed on, determined to see this through. Don't stop, the parrot urged, his voice echoing softly in the narrow space. We're close now. The sanctuary is just beyond this next bend. Sophie took a deep breath and nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just running from the magician anymore. She was on a quest, a journey to unlock something far more important than she had ever imagined. And she would face whatever challenges came next with courage. The narrow tunnel wound around them, twisting like a serpent through the depths of the earth. The air was damp and thick with an eerie stillness, broken only by the sound of Sophie's breath and the soft flutter of the parrot's wings ahead. The walls were covered in moss, slick with moisture, and the dim light from their surroundings cast strange shadows, making the path ahead seem endless. Sophie's heart was pounding in her chest, the excitement of the riddle's resolution now replaced by a deeper, more pressing feeling. They were getting closer to something, but what? She had no idea what the sanctuary looked like, or even what it truly was. Her mind was filled with the parrot's cryptic words. "It's a haven for all the creatures who have been silenced." What did that mean? And why had the parrot called her the secret keeper? Just ahead, the passage began to widen, the walls shifting from jagged stone to smoother, more polished surfaces. The air grew lighter, cooler, and the oppressive weight of the tunnel seemed to lift as they stepped into a large, open space. Sophie's eyes widened in awe as she gazed around the room. The chamber was vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadows far above them, and its walls were lined with shelves that seemed to stretch forever. The shelves were filled with jars, glass vials, and ancient books, all glowing with an otherworldly light. In the center of the room, there was a large stone archway, its frame carved with intricate patterns that seemed to dance in the dim light. The archway shimmered slightly, as if it were alive. "The sanctuary," the parrot whispered, his voice filled with reverence. "This is it." Sophie stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. The air in the chamber felt different, charged with magic and history. She could feel the weight of the place pressing in on her, as though every creature, every animal who had ever been silenced, was waiting for something, waiting for her. "Do you hear it?" the parrot asked softly, his feathers ruffling in the stillness. Sophie tilted her head, listening. At first, there was only silence, but then, faintly, she heard something, a soft hum like a distant melody. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, floating in the air like the whispers of 1,000 voices. "It's the choir," the parrot explained. "The voices of the animals, Sophie. They've been waiting for someone to hear them." Sophie's heart swelled. She had spent so many years hiding her secret, but now, in this moment, everything seemed to come together. She had always listened to the animals. She always had. And now it was time to help them be heard. Sophie took a hesitant step closer to the archway, the soft hum of the choir growing louder in her ears, like a song rising from the depths of her very soul. The air in the sanctuary was thick with anticipation, and Sophie felt as though every cell in her body was vibrating with the energy of this place. She reached out to touch the stone archway, its surface cool and smooth beneath her fingertips, and as she did, a strange warmth pulsed through her hand. The symbols etched into the stone flared to life, glowing softly like embers, their meaning shifting and flowing as though they were alive. "This is it," the parrot said, his voice filled with awe. "You must step through, Sophie. The sanctuary is waiting for you, but it won't open until you believe that you belong here." Sophie's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. But what did the parrot mean by believe? She had spent her entire life hiding her ability, keeping her secret close. Could she truly believe that she was worthy of this place, of the power to hear and understand the voices of animals? She closed her eyes, letting the hum of the choir fill her senses. She could feel the weight of all the creatures' voices, their longing to be heard, their yearning for freedom. She could hear their silent songs, the ones that had been silenced by magic and time, the ones that had been forgotten by the world. Sophie's hands trembled as she placed both palms against the archway. "I believe," she whispered, the words soft but steady. "I believe that I am meant to help you, to listen." There was a long, breathless pause, and for a moment, Sophie felt the entire sanctuary hold its breath, waiting. Then the stone archway shimmered, and a wave of energy surged through her, filling her with warmth and light. She gasped, her body trembling as the air around her seemed to come alive. The symbols on the stone shifted, rearranging themselves into a new pattern that seemed to beckon her forward. The parrot fluttered excitedly beside her. "You've done it, Sophie. Path is open. The choir can sing again. And you are the key." Sophie's eyes widened as the archway pulsed with light, and a pathway appeared before her, leading deeper into the sanctuary. She didn't hesitate this time. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, the hum of the choir now rising to a crescendo in her ears, urging her on. As Sophie stepped through the archway, the world around her seemed to blur and shift. It felt as though the very fabric of reality had warped, bending and twisting to accommodate her presence. For a moment, the ground beneath her feet seemed to disappear entirely, and she was weightless, suspended in a vast, unseen expanse. The hum of the choir enveloped her, swirling around her like a breeze, carrying the voices of countless animals, each one soft and beautiful, full of longing and hope. Then, in an instant, the sensation passed. Sophie's feet landed on solid ground, and she blinked in awe. Before her was a vast, open chamber, bathed in golden light. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass, and the space seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. It was a place beyond time, untouched by the decay of the outside world. Birds of every shape and color perched on the walls, their eyes watching her intently, as if they had been waiting for her arrival. "This is the sanctuary," the parrot's voice rang out, a note of reverence in it. "It is a place of peace, where the voices of all creatures who have been silenced can be heard. But it is also a place of power, a power that only the secret keeper can unlock." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She had thought the sanctuary was just a place to hide, a refuge from the dangers of the world above. But now she understood. It was much more than that. It was the heart of the animal world, a place where every whisper, every song could be shared freely. The parrot fluttered down from her shoulder, landing on a stone pedestal at the center of the chamber. "The choir is waiting," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "It is time for you to listen, Sophie, to hear what has been kept silent for so long." Sophie walked forward, her heart pounding in her chest. As she approached the pedestal, the air seemed to hum with anticipation. The birds on the walls tilted their heads, their eyes following her every movement. Slowly, she reached out and placed her hand on the stone. For a long moment, nothing happened. Sophie held her breath, her hand pressed against the cool surface, and then, suddenly, a sound filled the chamber. It was soft at first, like the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. But then it grew louder, swelling into a beautiful, harmonious chorus of voices. It was the sound of 1,000 animals, birds, foxes, wolves, even creatures she couldn't name, all singing together. Their voices rose and fell in perfect harmony, their songs full of joy and sorrow, of triumph and longing. Sophie closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her, feeling every note deep within her soul. She could hear the stories of the animals, their struggles, their triumphs, their dreams. She could feel their pain but also their hope. And as the final notes of the choir echoed through the sanctuary, Sophie understood. She wasn't just a listener. She was their bridge, their voice in the world. She was the one who could share their stories, who could bring their songs back to the world above. The last of the choir's song faded, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Sophie stood motionless in the center of the sanctuary, her heart racing as she tried to process the overwhelming flood of emotions and sensations. The animals' voices still echoed within her, not just in her ears, but deep inside her chest, where they had taken root, and she knew they would never leave. She was a part of them now, just as they were a part of her. The parrot watched her closely, a soft, approving smile on his beak. "You've done it," he said, his voice rich with pride. "The sanctuary is open to you. The animals have been waiting for someone to hear them, to give them a voice again. And now, Sophie, you are that voice." Sophie felt a rush of warmth and humility flood through her. She hadn't known, not truly, what this journey would mean. She had thought it was about helping a single bird escape a cruel magician. But now, standing in this sacred place, she realized it was about so much more. It was about reconnecting the world of animals with the world of humans, about breaking down the walls that had silenced them for so long. The parrot flapped his wings, breaking Sophie's reverie. "There's more to do, though. The magician will not rest. He knows we are here now, and he will stop at nothing to ensure that the sanctuary remains hidden and the voices of the animals are silenced once more." Sophie's chest tightened with fear at the thought of the magician returning. She had seen his power, the way his magic had twisted the world around him. But now, with the sanctuary open to her, she felt a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The parrot was right. This was far from over. But Sophie also knew that they weren't alone anymore. The animals were with her, and together they would fight back. "We have to protect this place," Sophie said, her voice firm. "We have to make sure the sanctuary stays safe, that the voices of the animals can be heard." The parrot nodded, his feathers glinting in the golden light. "Exactly. And you, Sophie, are the key. You are the one who can stop him." Sophie stood straighter, her resolve hardening. For the first time in her life, she felt truly powerful, not because of any magic she could wield, but because she had the strength of the animals behind her. The parrot was right. She was their bridge, and she would do whatever it took to protect their voices. "We'll stop him," Sophie said, her words quiet but full of certainty. "Together, we'll stop the magician." With the parrot by her side, and the sanctuary of voices at her back, Sophie knew that this was only the beginning. The world was about to change. Sophie's words seemed to linger in the air, full of promise and determination. As the parrot perched on a stone pillar, his eyes locked onto hers, a new understanding passed between them, an unspoken bond. They weren't just running from danger anymore. They were fighting for something far greater than themselves. The parrot's wings fluttered, his feathers ruffling with a quiet urgency. "Good," he said, breaking the silence. "But you must remember, Sophie, that the magician won't stop at just the sanctuary. He wants more than just to silence us. He wants to control the voices of all creatures. He wants power." Sophie nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. The task ahead was daunting, and yet she felt the truth of them. The magician's magic wasn't just about caging the voices of animals. It was about dominating them, bending them to his will. And if he succeeded, the delicate balance of the world would shatter. The freedom that animals like the parrot had taken for granted would disappear, replaced by a silence that would crush their spirits. "We can't let that happen," Sophie said, her voice steady now, growing in strength. "I won't let him take away their voices. Not when I finally understand them. Not when I've finally found a way to help them." The parrot tilted his head, his expression both proud and somber. "I knew you were the right one, Sophie. But there's one thing you must understand before we move forward. The sanctuary is powerful, but it is also fragile. If the magician finds it, if he learns how to break through the barriers we've placed, it will all be lost. You must be prepared, Sophie. There will be a time when you must choose between protecting the sanctuary and using its power to stop the magician. One choice will change everything." The weight of the decision hit Sophie like a stone. She had known there would be tough choices ahead, but the reality of them was far more daunting than she had imagined. She could feel the pull of the sanctuary, its energy flowing through her, but she also knew that if she used that power recklessly, it could come with consequences she wasn't prepared for. "I understand," Sophie said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'll do whatever it takes. But I won't let the animals suffer." The parrot fluttered closer, his eyes softening. "I believe you, Sophie. Really do. But remember, the path ahead won't be easy. The magician is powerful, and he will stop at nothing to control this place." Sophie turned toward the path leading out of the sanctuary, her heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. She had found her purpose, and she wouldn't back down. For the animals, for the sanctuary, and for the world that needed their voices, she would stand firm. The parrot followed her, his wings rustling. "Then let's go, Sophie. The battle isn't over yet." And with that, they began their journey back to the city, the sound of the animals' choir still echoing in their minds, a reminder of what they were fighting for. The journey back to the city was long, the weight of their mission growing heavier with each passing step. Sophie could feel the eyes of the animals in the sanctuary still upon her, as though they were sending her their silent hope, urging her forward. She had never imagined herself in such a position, standing between the world of humans and the world of animals, a bridge between the two. But as the parrot led her through the winding streets of the city, Sophie realized just how much was at stake. The city, once familiar and comforting, now felt strange to her. The clamor of the marketplace, the chatter of people, the constant hum of life, it all seemed distant, disconnected from the urgency of the task at hand. Sophie could hear the faint hum of the choir in her mind, a constant reminder of the creatures she had vowed to protect. She could feel their presence in every rustle of wind, in every shadow that passed her by. "We're getting close," the parrot said, his voice low and urgent. He fluttered ahead, his sharp eyes scanning the streets, alert to any sign of danger. "But you must be careful. The magician is still hunting us, and he'll stop at nothing to find the sanctuary." Sophie nodded, her senses heightened. She could feel the shift in the air, the weight of the magician's magic drawing nearer. The closer they got to the heart of the city, the more she could sense his presence. His dark, oppressive magic weaving through the streets, like a shadow stretching over everything. It was as if he were everywhere and nowhere all at once, a looming threat that Sophie couldn't escape. "Where will we go?" Sophie asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. "How do we stop him?" The parrot landed on a nearby rooftop, his wings rustling as he peered over the edge. "We need to find the magician before he finds us," he said, his tone sharp. "But we can't confront him directly. Not yet. We'll need to outsmart him, use his own magic against him." Sophie felt a surge of determination. She wasn't just going to run from him, not again. This time she would stand her ground. She had the power of the sanctuary, the voices of the animals, and the courage to fight for them. "Let's do it," Sophie said, her voice firm with resolve. "I'm ready." The parrot glanced at her, his eyes filled with respect. "Then let's make sure we stay one step ahead. Together, Sophie, we'll stop him." And with that, they ventured deeper into the city, their minds set on the task ahead. The battle for the sanctuary had begun, and Sophie would fight with everything she had. The city had never seemed so vast, its winding streets and towering buildings now feeling like a labyrinth designed to confuse and trap them. Sophie and the parrot moved swiftly, staying in the shadows, blending into the crowds whenever possible, but always aware of the looming threat that was just a step behind. Sophie could feel the weight of the parrot's urgency, his sharp eyes scanning every alleyway, every rooftop. As they neared the heart of the city, Sophie felt the air grow heavier. It was as though the very city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Sophie had been to these streets 1,000 times before, but now they seemed foreign, dangerous. The magic that the parrot had warned her about was everywhere, a cold, dark presence creeping through the cracks of the city. It felt like the magician was watching them, always a step ahead, always aware of their movements. The parrot spoke again, his voice tight with tension. "We're close. The magician's stronghold is just ahead. But we must be careful. If he knows we're here, he'll use his magic to trap us. We'll have to move quickly, silently. Sophie nodded, her mind racing. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. She had come so far, and she knew what was at stake. The sanctuary, the voices of the animals, her connection to them. It all depended on this moment. They rounded a corner, and there it was. The old clock tower, its face cracked and worn, its hands frozen in time. Sophie felt a shiver run down her spine as she stared at it. It was a place of power, a place that the magician had claimed for himself. The dark energy surrounding it was palpable, a swirling vortex of magic that Sophie could almost feel tugging at her, trying to pull her in. "This is it," the parrot said, his voice low and steady. "The magician is inside. But we can't just barge in. He's expecting us." Sophie swallowed hard. This was it. The moment she had been preparing for. The moment when everything would come to a head. There was no turning back now. She had to trust in herself, in the bond she shared with the animals, and in the power of the sanctuary. "What do we do now?" Sophie asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. The parrot looked at her, his gaze filled with quiet confidence. "We fight, Sophie. But we fight smart. We use the magic we've unlocked, the power we've gained, and we show him that we will not be silenced." Sophie nodded, feeling the surge of courage rush through her. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to let the magician take everything away. Not when the sanctuary and the animals needed her more than ever. With a deep breath, Sophie stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The air around Sophie and the parrot grew colder as they approached the clock tower. The dark energy from within seemed to press against them, as if the very walls were alive with magic. Sophie could feel her heart beating faster, her pulse quickening with every step. She had never faced anything like this before, but the parrot was right. This was the moment that would define everything. They had to stop the magician, or all the voices of the animals, all the power of the sanctuary would be lost. The parrot fluttered ahead, landing on the edge of the tower's entrance. "We're almost there," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Remember, Sophie, the magic you hold is powerful. Use it wisely." Sophie took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sanctuary's energy still coursing through her. She had unlocked something within herself during their time in the sanctuary, a connection to the animals that gave her strength and clarity. She wasn't just the listener anymore. She was the protector, the bridge between their world and the human one. They reached the heavy wooden door of the tower, its surface etched with strange runes that pulsed with dark energy. Sophie reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and pressed her palm against the door. The runes flared to life, swirling with a malevolent glow as if warning her to turn back. But she didn't hesitate. She could feel the parrot's gaze on her, urging her forward. With a determined breath, Sophie pushed the door open. It creaked on its hinges, the sound of ancient wood grinding against stone reverberating through the air. Inside, the tower was dimly lit, its walls lined with shelves filled with strange objects, crystals, books, and ancient artifacts, all emanating an eerie, unnatural glow. At the far end of the room, standing before a massive stone altar, was the magician. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud, dark and foreboding. He turned slowly, his cold, calculating eyes locking onto Sophie as she stepped inside. "You've come," he said, his voice smooth and low, like the rumble of thunder in the distance. "I knew you would. But you are too late, little girl. This sanctuary, these voices, they belong to me now." Sophie took a step forward, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. The parrot perched on her shoulder, his wings rustling with anticipation. "No," Sophie said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. "They belong to the animals, not you." The magician laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed through the tower. "You think you can stop me? You with your weak, pitiful magic. Control everything here. And when I'm finished, even you will be silent." Sophie stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "You've underestimated me," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And you've underestimated the power of the sanctuary. The animals will always have a voice, and I will always listen." With that, Sophie stretched out her hand, calling on the magic of the sanctuary. The air around her shimmered, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with energy. The magician's confident smile faltered for a moment as the power of the sanctuary surged through Sophie, filling her with a strength she had never known before. She could feel the voices of the animals, each one, each song, each cry for freedom, rising within her, and for the first time, Sophie realized that she wasn't alone. As the magician raised his hands, summoning his own dark magic, Sophie did not hesitate. She released the power of the sanctuary, letting it flow through her and out into the room like a tidal wave. The magician's magic faltered, his control slipping as the force of the sanctuary's energy overwhelmed him. His face twisted in fury as he struggled to maintain his hold on the magic. But it was too late. The sanctuary had been unlocked, and no force, no magician, no darkness, could silence its power again. With a final, triumphant cry, Sophie released the last of the magic, and the tower erupted in a blinding flash of light. "Sweet dreams,"